Welcome back to Extra Holiday Games. I'm Extra Holiday, and this is an extra episode, not for you, for me. Normally I only record 4 episodes per batch, but this is still the same as the last episode, so this is the 5th episode of the batch. I just felt like recording more, which is good. It's very good, because at one point I was in a point where I was like, I just don't want to record ever. But I'm kind of enjoying myself right now, so after taking a little bit of a break, I'm enjoying myself again, so that's good. I'm glad. Feels good. Feels good. Right? Because that's how many times have I said it? That's the whole point, right? If nobody's having fun with this, then like there's no point. Like, for the most part, this isn't true for every video on my channel, but for the most part, the only one who has fun from that episode's existence is me, because look, I don't want to harp on the point, but I don't have a lot of viewership. It's fine. It's fine. Why do I talk about it so much? If it's fine, why do you talk about it so much? Oh man, it's not a big deal. The man doth protest too much. Shut up. What's that quote from? I feel like, or he doth protest too much. Is that Shakespeare? It's probably Shakespeare, right? So where else do you hear that kind of Middle English, you know? I remember one of my assignments in high school, I think it was like pre-AP English. One of my assignments was to translate Romeo and Juliet into a more modern vernacular, right? Because the version we were reading was pretty close to the original, I imagine. Basically, all they did was printed it in a textbook. All right, the actual verbiage being used, as archaic as it was still in there. You know, the actual words that Shakespeare wrote down, because there's a lot of words in Shakespeare that aren't used anymore. Who'da thunk it was written 500 years ago? Point is, they had us translate it, basically, because reading Shakespeare raw now is kind of hard. There's just so many words that just aren't used now, that are technically English, or at least were at the time, so yeah. Point is, we had an assignment where we had to translate, and it's interesting, right? Because, you know, there were varying levels of people taking it seriously or not, but it's I would like to see that. Maybe it's already been done. It's probably already been done, actually. I mean, how many times has the story of Romeo and Juliet been reimagined, if you will? I mean, there's like West Side Story, I know, is basically Romeo and Juliet, but set in New York in the early 1900s or something. There's the Romeo and Juliet has become almost more of a genre than just a story in itself. And in fact, if I remember right, I think I heard that Shakespeare himself didn't even come up with the idea for that story by himself. Like, he based it off of something else, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's where was I going? Point was, oh, it was an interesting assignment, because and of course the idea behind it was like, because it was kind of hard to read, they wanted to make us tackle it so that we could spend some extra time just translating it into something that we could understand. And even then, right, the opening scene in Romeo and Juliet I didn't understand until someone actually went and explained it to me. And I think I've explained it on this channel, so I'll spare you another explanation. But for once, Holiday isn't repeating himself. But yeah, there is. There's an opening bit in that play that I didn't get initially. It was supposed to be comedy, and I didn't even realize that it was supposed to be comedy. Actually, that brings up an interesting thing that I have thought about recently. Have you ever really thought about how much your expectations for something affect how much you enjoy it? Because I've had that thought recently. Namely, recently I took a class, a couple of classes even, on, well, a couple of classes. This showed up in a couple of the classes that that I've taken recently. One of which was a class on Francis Ford Coppola, the director. And if you don't know him, he did the Godfather trilogy and Apocalypse Now, and what was his other big one? I mean, One from the Heart wasn't super big, but it's actually really interesting to watch, at least as a film and media studies student. But he's a pretty successful director. That's probably understating it, but he's a director, and at my school there's a class that you can take about him and his movies. The first movie that we watched in that class, and let me set this up for you. At that point, the only movies that I knew he had made were the Godfather trilogy, and I knew that the Godfather trilogy, those were kind of more like serious dramas, right? That they were just kind of, they were, you know, gang films, quote unquote, as it were. Like not like modern gang films, but mafia films, right? They never used the word mafia because they would get in trouble with the actual mafia, but they were mafia films. So yeah, the only thing I knew Coppola for at that point was the Godfather films. And so the first film that we watched for that class was not any of the Godfather films. It was one of Coppola's first theatrical releases, which was You're a Big Boy Now. And you might think, going in with the expectation of this guy being the guy who made Godfather, you might think like, wow, that's kind of a weird name, right? For like a drama film. And I didn't really have that thought at that point, but I was expecting, going into this movie, I was expecting, you know, something serious. And so when I was watching it, I watched it and I was having the weirdest sensation of like, man, I just don't like any of these characters. Like, why? Like, what's the deal? Like, I was watching the movie because it was part of the class, but I wasn't enjoying it because I was like, everyone kind of sucks in this movie. I don't like that. Turns out that You're a Big Boy Now is not meant to be a serious drama. It was meant to be a comedy. So I was looking at the movie through the lens of something like The Godfather, which meant that everyone, and when you look at a serious or a comedy film through a serious lens, then everyone just kind of looks like an asshole or dumb or just totally unrelatable, basically. Because you're taking the movie seriously while the movie itself is not taking itself seriously. So that's why I ended up not liking the movie. Because I was expecting the movie to take itself seriously, and then it didn't, and I was like, and I didn't pick up on the fact that it wasn't taking itself seriously, so it read less like this is a movie that's funny and entertaining. You know, it read less like an entertaining, lighthearted coming-of-age story and more like just a poorly put together mess that's like supposed to be touching, I guess, but it doesn't really work on that. But that was my fault. That was kind of. It was because I didn't even know the genre of the film that I didn't end up liking it. And the same sort of thing happened. It wasn't quite as bad in this instance, but the same sort of thing happened when I took a class on horror films, and the first movie we watched there was Cabin in the Woods, which I think is old enough that I can talk about freely now. Cabin in the Woods is not actually a horror movie. Like, it could be scary to some people, right? It's a little gory, like there's that, but it's not actually a horror movie. It's a parody on horror movies, which is great because I love parodies. Parodies nuts. I love parodies. But I didn't realize going into the film that it was a parody. It wasn't until like the last half hour of the movie that I was like, oh, this is a spoof. And granted, at that point, unlike with You're a Big Boy Now, at that point I had already been laughing because horror is one of those genres where if it's done poorly, it's actually funny. And some parts, it wasn't as intense an effect as You're a Big Boy Now because it's just because, like, even in a horror movie, there are moments of levity, right? And you can say the same for dramas too. There are intentional moments of levity in a lot of horror movies, but the point I'm trying to get at is I've watched bad horror movies before. In fact, my friends and I used to get together on the weekends to watch bad sci-fi and bad horror movies. So I was familiar with the idea of laughing at a horror movie even when it's intended to be serious. By the way, also another horror movie, quote-unquote horror movie, that I laughed at in that class was Black Sheep. That one's great. Those were my two favorite movies from the class. I kind of lost my train of thought here. The Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, so I actually ended up enjoying Cabin in the Woods once I figured out that, oh yeah, this is actually more of a comedy than it is a horror movie. But I did still encounter some of that weirdness when I was expecting it to actually be a horror film. There was stuff like, oh, well, that they didn't make that very scary. But it turns out, they did that on purpose because, again, you're supposed to be laughing more than you are cowering in your seat. I don't know, it's weird. It's weird how much a person's expectations of something can change their actual experience with it. Because you're kind of just judging based on it. Your expectation kind of acts as your frame of reference for the experience you're having, right? So, I mean, to put this in a more practical sense, maybe, if you're expecting something to go bad, then, well, one of two things happens. You're either happily surprised, or things go better than expected, and you're like, oh man, that's cool, that's all right. I'm glad it happened that way. Or you go in and because you're expecting things to go bad, you are looking out for all the things that would make it bad. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird how much the hype you have for something can affect your experience with it. And of course you can have the opposite effect too, where like you're expecting something to be really good and it doesn't live up to your expectations because nothing ever really possibly could. You've hyped it up that much that nothing could possibly live up to that. But yeah, basically what I've learned, the biggest thing I learned from those two classes, I think, is that your expectations do really shape your experience a lot of the times. So you can kind of control the experience, how you experience life, by what you expect. Either you expect very little and you get pleasantly surprised, or I guess managing your expectations is kind of a skill that is useful in life. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Because it will actually change what your experiences are. You know, it'll actually change. Sounds weird to say this, but it will actually change your life. I don't mean to sound like every motivational speaker or crypto scam, but it will. Learning to be as positive as is reasonable. At least this is what I think. Learning to be as positive as is reasonable when going into something will benefit you. It'll make the thing you're doing more enjoyable. You know, whatever experience you're having, it will make it more enjoyable, I think. Personally. It's just what I think. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Okay. No, that's not my outro. It's not even time for my outro yet. 'Cause I have to die at least one more time. That's because I arbitrarily said so. Yeah, that's one thing. That's one thing I thought between episodes. Like, should I just talk more about? Should I just talk more about watching other people's stuff? Because I do watch a lot of YouTube. I don't know why I have such an aversion to talking about the stuff that I watch on YouTube. I know people would be interested, because I myself am interested in hearing what other people think about the stuff that I watch. But I don't know, something... I have some sort of reservation about it. Like, it doesn't feel like... I guess this is just me being far too picky, but it doesn't feel like worthy content, you know? I guess it's because it kind of feels like I'm piggybacking off of other people. I think that's what it is. I think when I talk about other people's content, I feel like it's... I feel like I kind of think that, like... I'm not providing anything useful myself. I'm just kind of riding the coattails of someone else. And maybe that's true. But that being said, a lot of people do it, and that doesn't necessarily make it right, but it makes it seem right. Yeah, so maybe I'll do that in the future. Maybe I'll just talk more about what I watch on YouTube, and I have been doing that slightly more as of late. And in fact, I have been considering doing streams where I just watch stuff that I would normally watch anyway and react, because why not? Lava Fett. Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's weird. It's weird because they say when you're making this sort of thing that you should make stuff, particularly when you're making videos, you should make the videos that you would like to watch, right? The kind of videos you would like to watch. And I do a lot. I watch a lot of reactions. Like, I watch maybe too many reactions. So theoretically, that would mean that I should maybe do them myself. right? Because then at least I know that at least one person is interested in that, and obviously more, because these videos wouldn't be getting to me if it was just me interested in them. That's kind of the neat little loophole to the whole algorithm, particularly the YouTube algorithm, is anything that reaches you is not something that doesn't have any amount of appeal. It might not be your thing, but someone enjoyed that video that's being recommended to you. And that's why it's being recommended. Because someone enjoyed it. It's interesting, right? It's interesting. I think I just need to chill here. I think I just need to... Frick. I think I just need to calm down, not go too crazy. Oh. Okay. Alright. I'm killing some of them, which is good. Oh. Okay. Hang out up here. Okay. I hung out up there too long, apparently. But maybe I won't hang out up there too long next time. Because, as for this episode, that's a wrap. Okay, that's all the extra episodes I can do.